This program, while curated to help you improve your health, contains general advice and should not replace the individual advice of your medical practitioner.
The symptoms that bothered me the most were nausea, bloating, cramping, headaches, and the foggy-headedness. And I pretty much had gut symptoms every single day.
In life, it's normal to have ups and downs. But what do we do when we get stuck? I've always been fascinated by the healing journey. Why do some people get better while others fail to make the shift?
Welcome to the Patient Series, where we explore the stories of 4 patients with complex health conditions to understand their journey to healing and how they made their shift.
We all have barriers to overcome.
The biggest thing that I discovered was the link between gut health and mental health. I deserve to be healthy and happy.
I'm Katherine Maslen, and this is The Shift. My name is Katherine Maslen. I'm a naturopath, author, the founder and head of Shift Clinics, and of course, I'm your host of this mini-series and the Shift podcast. In season 1 of The Shift, we deep dove into the fascinating field of gut health. You heard the very best from 24 world experts in gut and surrounding health. You discovered the latest in microbiome research and explored the many facets of digestive health. Then we had the Expert Series, where you heard the stories and expertise of each of our amazing experts from season 1 of The Shift. If you haven't listened to season 1, I'd highly recommend going back to episode 1, which is called How to Make a Shift in Your Gut Health. In this series, we're going to spend some time with the patients that have gone through their journey to make the shift. I'm going to delve into their personal healing journeys to understand what the process of making the shift looked like for them. It is my hope that from these stories, you can get some insights and inspiration to make your next big shift too. In this episode of the Shift Patient Series, we have Jane. Jane is a 34-year-old woman from Brisbane, Australia, who's been on her healing journey for about 8 years. In this episode, you'll hear how Jane made the connection between her physical and emotional health, her roller coaster ride addressing her SIBO and period pain, and some very important insights on how her early years have contributed to her current state of health now. The first thing that I wanted to know was what Jane's early childhood was like. Our early years have a lot of influence on our current health outcomes, and I wanted to see if there was anything that could explain Jane's current state of health. Let's see what comes up in the interview.
I was born in Sydney. My mother had just immigrated over from the Czech Republic in Europe. So I was born about 3 weeks after they landed here by caesarean.
So she was pregnant while she was travelling over here?
She was pregnant. She was in a highly stressful situation when she was pregnant with me. She escaped communism, running away with 2 kids, pregnant with me. So they got to Sydney and then she had me 24 days after landing by caesarean. That was her 3rd caesarean. And after the birth, all I know is that I didn't breastfeed for long. I think it was just a couple of days and then straight on the bottle.
So that's a pretty intense way to come into the world.
That's a pretty full-on way to come into the world.
So as a baby, did your parents ever recall that you were sick or had any health problems when you were little?
I have asked them extensively this in the last few years, given what's happened with my gut, and neither of them can remember any major issues. I got a few fevers over the years when I was little and probably only went on antibiotics once or twice as a child.
And then what about through primary school, high school? How was your health then?
It's always getting colds, like upper respiratory stuff. I caught some strange, still unidentifiable virus in North Queensland, which had me in emergency intensive care for about 2 weeks.
How old were you when that happened?
11. They gave me a combination of drugs which made my hair fall out 3 months later. They didn't know if it was either scrub typhus or leptospirosis that I had. I've still got a little mark on my chest wall from where something bit me, whether it be a tick or a bug. Yeah, I basically lost consciousness. I was hallucinating, delirious and fevers. So yeah, they flew me to intensive care for 2 weeks. I remember hallucinating a lot in the hospital and just being really scared and alone.
So they gave you the drugs. Did you get better?
Yeah, I got better, I recovered, but then about a month later all my hair started falling out, and that was around the age of 11, 12. That was a really hard time for me because at that age in school, my health seemed okay. I just always seemed to be catching colds and like having sore throats. And I started getting bullied a bit at school because of that, like the hair thing. But then I changed schools and things seemed to get better. But yeah, I always just seemed to be I just have a bit of a low immunity.
So you moved schools, getting colds and flus. Any other symptoms that started cropping up?
Just a real kind of inability to deal with stress. Like that's always been a big thing for me, like unable to cope with stress. I'm quite sensitive emotionally and intuitively. And my family dynamic was pretty, not a very calm environment. So dealing with all the family stuff was always really hard for me. My parents split up and it was really traumatic at the age of, 11 actually, just before I got that virus that sent me to hospital.
So your parents split up, emotional trauma, and then you got really, really sick.
Yeah, actually I just made that link. So they split up. It was really, really traumatic. And then I got sick probably about a month later.
Hormones are the number one thing that will make you feel crazy. Issues like weight gain, anxiety, depression, sleep, and even bloating are all impacted by our hormones.
I'm seeing the evolution of malfunction of the female body.
We're talking about women's hormones, we're talking about autoimmunity, and let's talk about the connection between the two there.
Season 2 of The Shift is coming soon and I can't wait. In this season of The Shift, I'm going to deep dive into everything related to hormonal health.
Turns out that being on your period doesn't make you weaker, it actually makes you stronger. Oh, whoa, that's so opposite of what I was taught growing up.
Does sex leave you feeling rejuvenated, ecstatic, transformed, and like it changed your life?
I would like call to arms for women around the world to know that their intuition isn't lying to them.
Our hormones, as I think most women probably have experienced, are everything.
Make sure you subscribe right now and follow us on Instagram at The Shift Clinic so you don't miss a thing. So what about through like the later years of high school? When did you get your period?
A week before year 8. So
You remember?
I think I was 12, nearly 13. And yeah, periods were heavy and painful.
Right from the start?
Right from the start. Like crippling, doubled over pain.
How did that make you feel as a teenager, sort of going through that and experiencing that?
Horrible. I just felt horrible in my body. Like it was my period. Like it just felt like such a violent kind of thing happening to my body. Yeah, I was always kind of embarrassed about it, or like just didn't want it to be happening kind of thing. Just wanted it to feel nice.
What other symptoms were you experiencing in high school that you remember?
I had bad like spots on my face. So like hormonal kind of like, it wasn't acne, just pimples and stuff. And with my health, just more stress.
Yeah, stress, overwhelm, anxiety?
I would say yes until I'd actually experienced true anxiety a few years ago. I feel like I was anxious and stressed, but I wasn't actually having panic attacks or anxiety attacks.
I want to take pause here to reflect on Jane's early life and what that could mean for her current state of health. But before we do that, it's probably helpful if I explain to you what a naturopath is so you can understand the lens that I'm looking at when I'm digesting this information. The term naturopath can be used quite widely depending on where you are in the world, but in Australia, it's someone that looks at your whole health and then treats your whole body using natural health care, largely herbal medicines, nutritional supplementation, diet and lifestyle interventions. At Shift, our naturopaths work primarily by looking at your story, your symptoms, and any testing you've had done. We then use this to develop a health story as to why you have your current symptoms and which of your body systems are most affected right now. Essentially, what I'm interested in understanding is the landscape of your entire health, all the pieces that make you, you. When I'm asking Jane these questions about her early years, what I'm looking for are factors that can influence long-term health and act as precursors or underlying causes to her current reality. When you're assessing your health, it's important to understand your entire story so that you can pick up clues as to why you're experiencing what you are right now. Your health history, as well as your current environment, are all important to understand the landscape of your health so you can decide what to do next. For Jane, who has had to deal with several chronic health issues, as you'll discover, the first thing I picked up on was the high amount of stress her mother had while she was in utero. High maternal stress, which basically means that your mother was really stressed while you were growing inside of her, has been linked to multiple health issues. So this would not have been the best start for Jane. She's then only breastfed for 2 weeks, and we know that breast milk has important nutrients for the baby's development, as well as both live bacteria and prebiotic fibres that benefit the newborn and help it to establish a healthy microbiome. As we discuss in episode 7 of The Shift Season 1, a baby's microbiome is likely the most important factor when it comes to their risk of developing chronic diseases as they age. A robust microbiome is also important for the baby's immune system and can influence their ability to fight off infections. While Jane only had a couple of courses of antibiotics before the age of 10, the severe illness that put her in hospital led to many more courses. We know from research that even one course of antibiotics can disrupt the microbiome, and for some people, the changes that occur after taking antibiotics can permanently alter their microbial health for good. Let's keep going and see how the story unfolds. So when was the first time that you noticed significant symptoms enough to make you think, oh, this is something that I need to look at?
Well, I'm really good at avoidance. So I had a few instances where I actually went to the hospital because I had such bad gut pain, like someone was twisting my intestines. And that was through my early 20s. I didn't do anything about it. When I actually did start doing something about it was about 5 years ago. So the age of 28, I started looking for answers because I was just getting such painful bloating and inability to lose any weight. Shed any weight, even though I'd switched over to a much healthier lifestyle.
Tell me about the mental process that was going on at that time. What was the self-talk that you had going on that sort of prevented you from making that step to look at it?
Okay, so I was blaming pretty much my parents for everything that was going on in my life, which is why I was acting out. I was drinking and drugs and stuff. So I guess the whole process around that was me not wanting to look at that or take any responsibility. So when I started looking at my gut issues and like my uterine and hormonal issues, that's when I started doing more work on the emotional and energetic side of everything. And the thought process was more, I need to heal on all levels, not just on a physical, because it doesn't work. I tried it and it didn't work at all.
So tell me, you were in hospitals, sort of they didn't find anything. When was it that you started looking outside of that for answers?
I'd always been open to like complementary and alternative medicine since I was young. When I really started looking outside of that was probably about 8 years ago. But then when I started actually seeing naturopaths and energy healers and all of that, probably about 5 years ago to really start working on it, on my gut especially. And that's when I started seeing some change, some shifting happening, because as soon as I started working on my emotional wellness, things started moving because I was actually ready. Like I was ready to take responsibility for my body.
Let's stop to talk about what this means for Jane, because it's a pattern that I see a lot and one of the biggest fundamentals to making the shift. In order to make a shift, you have to take responsibility for your health. You have to really own where you are and take responsibility for your own journey and the actions that have gotten you there. While this can be incredibly confronting, it allows us to stop living in a state of victim and begin to take action to shift us in the right direction. In my experience, it isn't until someone can fully own where they are in their journey that true healing can occur. For Jane, it wasn't until she acknowledged the emotional aspects of her health that she could really begin to make some significant headway with her issues. What are the parts of your story that you're not looking at? What are the emotions that relate to your health issues? Do you feel like you've taken full responsibility for where you are right now? This doesn't mean that you need to be perfect or even be seeking help and making change at this point. It's about really seeing what is going on for you and owning where you're at. Let's move on to see what happened when Jane began to get support to work through her issues. So tell me, when you started seeing naturopaths and getting support and going down that side of the pathway, what were the symptoms that you're experiencing?
Real foggy headedness. My memory was getting really bad. The bloating was huge, and the bloating was it was making me feel feelings of like I really didn't like myself. I didn't like me in clothes. I hated myself, basically. When I was bloated, these emotions would come up where I really didn't like myself. And then when the bloating went away, I would feel fine. So that was making me think too, like, what's going on? Like, what's the connection here?
And how did it interfere with the way you were living your life, feeling that way? Did it stop you from doing anything, or did it change the way that you experience things day to day?
Oh, yeah, it changed a lot. I didn't feel comfortable wearing certain clothes, so I started wearing different kinds of clothes. Didn't feel comfortable in the things I used to wear. Didn't want to be, in my bikinis in front of certain people. I felt so awful a lot of the time eating a lot of foods that I felt like I couldn't attend certain social events. Didn't want to have to keep explaining myself to all my separate friends because I didn't want to talk about it because it was like a negative. So it really impacted my life a lot.
What was the impact around mealtime? So when you were thinking of eating or when you were going out, what was your thought process around food?
It's just tiring. It was an exhausting process, and I just hated thinking about food. I was so sick of it. I was over it. I didn't want to have to think about it. I really had a bit of a block too with preparing food. Like, it just stressed me out so bad. I honestly don't know where I would be without my partner, because he just prepared a lot of food for me, because I would just stress out and then just not want to eat and then just have broth or just have something really basic, but not nutritionally rich.
So it's like you were in this cycle where you had bloating, gut issues, stress probably made it worse, but every time you wanted to eat, it was a really stressful experience.
Yeah. And then the pain, like, it felt like I had rocks in my belly all the time.
How did that make you feel?
Awful.
Reviews help us know that we're hitting the mark with what you need and help us to shape future seasons. I'd really appreciate it if you could take a few moments to leave us a review. I would love to know what you think.
The Shift!
How long did it take you to find out what the problem was?
Quite a few years. So from when I first started seeking, I think about 2.5 years from when I actually started looking at what's going on with my gut. I've been to numerous doctors who just did a really basic parasite or bacteria tests. Didn't bring up anything. Symptoms are still there. Couldn't get any help. Started seeing the naturopaths, digging a bit more, digging a bit deeper, and then finally found out that it was SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And then that's when my treatment and my symptoms really got a lot better.
So what happens once you were diagnosed with SIBO? What was the journey from there?
By the time I got to knowing that I had SIBO, I was pretty much right in the midst of my stress and anxiety around food phase. And then I found out I had to do a 3-month biphase diet, and I kind of freaked out. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do this again. I opted to go for the medical antibiotics that treat it, which treated it. I took them. It did it. And then I kept up with the SIBO biphase diet, which really helped. And my symptoms just got so much better, big improvement.
Can you think of a memory or a time in your life where these health problems definitely impacted the way you were experiencing it? So if you had, potentially had to go to an event or something was coming up where this actually coloured the whole experience and changed it for you?
Yeah, there's a lot of music festivals that I couldn't have a drink at with my friends, and that just made me feel really depressed, really depressed. Also, my partner and I went traveling overseas, and this is at the start of when I was getting really intense gut symptoms. So we were backpacking for 6 months, and I pretty much had gut symptoms every single day. So that I made a pact with myself to not let it impact our activities, but it did. It impacted the intensity of our activities, and for I'd say adding up, there would have been quite a few weeks where I just stayed in bed because I was so ill. And my partner, I sent him off to do stuff on his own.
Yeah.
So yeah, it really did impact my life.
Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah, it sucks. I just seemed to catch every gut bug going around on the trip, whereas he only got sick once in 6 months and I got sick about 15 to 20 times.
So tell me about your periods and hormones then. Like what's been the journey with that?
That's been the longest journey, actually. I feel like that's the core issue. Ever since I got my period, getting these horribly painful periods, really began to hate having my period and essentially hate being a woman, because having a period is what it means to be a woman. So, and I would just cover it up. Every time my period was coming, I would feel awful. I'd get PMS. My moods would go crazy. I would just get really horribly snappy and moody. And then I would just take Nurofen just to cover everything and just forget that I was having a period, basically. And it's about 4 years ago, I started seeing a naturopath for my periods. I really wanted to get on top of it. Ended up going to have a laparoscopic surgery to see if I had endometriosis. Negative, I don't have endometriosis. I have adenomyosis, low grade apparently, which has been causing all my pain. My symptoms are better with that because I've been on a really healthy and mindful journey these last 4 years, but they're still there.
I want to jump in here briefly and discuss what Jane said about growing to hate being a woman because of what she was experiencing with her menstrual cycle. Jane definitely isn't alone with feeling this way. Women's health issues are so common. And what we see at Shift is that often there can be a dissociation with this part of ourselves, or even a complete disdain for the natural process of our menstrual cycle. This can then lead to a really toxic relationship with your body, and the emotions associated with this can compound the issues. In season 2 of The Shift, we're going to be exploring hormonal health and having a wider conversation about this. But just really briefly, it's important to note that period pain is not normal. Feeling awful around your period is not normal. These are signs of imbalance within the system, and they need to be taken seriously and addressed. If you have any irregularities around your menstrual cycle, please seek help from a health professional who can guide you in the right direction and help you to find out what the problem is. What's your health like now? What have the changes been between now and kind of 4 years ago when you began this journey?
I just feel so much happier in my body now. Now I have more of a mindset of if I'm doing something, I'm just going to enjoy it. And as a result, I don't feel any symptoms from it. I actually feel okay. It's when I start stressing about things and about food and what I'm putting in my body that I start getting reactions. So I feel a lot better in my body now, and I feel like I love myself more, or enough to actually do that. The period stuff I'm still dealing with, but I'm really I give myself space to just take time out when I need it.
How much of the symptoms that you're getting do you think has been attributed to physical things or to emotional or stress?
I think I'm so reactive emotionally. So if I'm feeling emotional or stressed, my symptoms just skyrocket. And I feel like intuitively that's where it's come from initially as well. And I have been thinking about this a lot, about the stuff with my mum from when she was pregnant with me, transferring to me, this kind of stress and not feeling grounded. And I feel like that's kind of, transferred into my tissues and into my body.
You're still on the journey, yeah?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. How do you feel at this point of the journey, knowing that you still have some of these symptoms that you need to knock off compared to 4 years ago when you started the journey? What's your mindset like around it?
I don't think I ever could have imagined feeling better when I was unwell. I couldn't even remember how it felt to feel good. I couldn't remember. That's what was so sad about it. Whereas now I feel so much better, but I'm struggling with emotional wellness and just keeping my nervous system calm and my stress levels low. That's where I am at now, to help keep my body at a good equilibrium. Yeah, and my gut symptoms do flare up every now and again. I'm pretty aware of the triggers, but I also allow myself to live my life, so enjoying some things I couldn't before with relatively minimal symptoms.
How important do you think your support team has been to this journey?
Oh, it's been so important. Like if I didn't feel like anyone cared about me, it would have just been so hard, because with the symptoms comes the mental stress and also the, oh, am I worth it? Does anyone really care? Like this is so awful. Why would anyone even care about me? So having like a whole team supporting you every step of the way was just amazing. And it kind of keeps you on track as well.
Can you tell me a little bit about that, about the journey of getting better and any roadblocks or hurdles that you've come across?
Yeah, sure. So the journey is a long one because it takes a while to get on top of SIBO, and I'm still on that journey. I did have a bit of a roadblock where it flared up again just after treatment, and like it really freaked me out. And for no apparent reason, I was actually being super strict with the diet and just doing everything like I should be. And it just flared up for no reason. And it was at that point that I just gave myself permission to just accept that sometimes that just happens. And it's not because I've done something wrong. So I stopped beating myself up about everything. And that actually was a big catalyst for things starting to get better too.
So if you could give just one piece of advice to someone who wanted to make a shift in their health or in their life, what would it be?
Go with your gut intuition and truly go and seek support, because that's where everything starts turning. Because as soon as you open your mind to receiving support, other doors will open that will help facilitate that.
A huge thank you to Jane for sharing her story. You have to be brave to make a shift in your health, and even more brave to be able to share your story with us. What can we learn from this conversation? Firstly, I want to point out that Jane took a very holistic approach to her healing, and still does in fact. The SIBO treatment journey is one of the most challenging that we see our clients go through at Shift. And in our experience, it needs a multifaceted approach and a lot of patience from the person going through it. For Jane, her journey continues, but the further along she gets, the more she learns about herself and her body and is able to heal. It's important to note that the systems in your body do not operate independently. The modern medical model sees them as separate silos with separate specialists that focus on just one area. For example, for a patient like Jane, she could have seen a gynecologist, endocrinologist, gastroenterologist, and even psychiatrist, none of which would have spoken to each other about her overall case. SIBO is a secondary condition, so naturopathically we want to look at all of the potential causes and risk factors to make a decision on how best to treat it. Jane's treatment involved looking at her microbiome, addressing motility issues at the gut layer, supporting emotional health and stress, and helping to regulate hormones. If any of the themes in this podcast resonated with you and you'd like some help, then please head to theshiftclinic.com, where you can book a discovery and diagnosis session with one of our amazing naturopaths who can help you discover what the health of your entire body is like and what you need to do to help yourself to heal.
Coming up on The Shift.
It was overwhelmingly defeating. I just couldn't understand what was wrong with me. I honestly felt like most of the time I was in this massive fog. But I'm learning me every single day, and I'm accepting and kind to myself. This is a journey, and this is starting something that's going to make me feel better.
Have you listened to season 1 of The Shift? If you're enjoying the expert series, you'll love season 1, where we deep dive into the field of gut health with 25 of the world leaders in this area. Head back to your podcast app and find episode 1. It's a great place to start.